So to troubleshoot, the first thing I did was record various frequencies on both gauge clusters. So I started with a chart, which is this chart here, and I recorded increments between 500 and 8,000 RPM. The first increment being at 500, then 1,000, and then I increased by 1K all the way through. And then this particular column here shows reference. References comes from a document I found on the internet, which is very helpful in this whole endeavor. It comes from R3V Limited. It's a great post on how to test his gauge clusters, and this particular user recorded on this car, which he references also as an M3. He said that at 500 RPMs we should be running at about 34 hertz, and then 1,000 all the way through to 7,000. For some reason he did not take it to 8,000, which is unfortunate. But this is our baseline of what we should be getting. So I copied those results over here, where our reference point is 500 RPM should equal 34 hertz. And then I made two more charts indicating both the 6-cylinder module, which is this little module here, and also the 8,000, 5,000 TAC. And then I did all the same results with 4-cylinder module on the M3 cluster with 8,000 and 5,000. So anyway, long story short is I was able to get the same results using this gauge cluster as I was with this gauge cluster. And that eliminates a lot of, narrows down quite a bit of troubleshooting. It means that this particular board here is fine, and so is the actual cluster itself. So as soon as I was able to rule that out, then I just focused on the cluster from the S14. And then I began doing a bunch of tests and comparing how the 5,000 to the 8,000 KR RPM indicator did in this particular cluster using each of the two modules. And that's this other chart that I created here. Here's my reference in blue. That's this line right here. Then the 8,000 TAC with the 6-cylinder module, and then the 5,000 TAC with the 6-cylinder module is in green and yellow. So that's this guy right here. So there was quite a difference. They inverted about the 2,250 RPM range. One became higher than the other. So they started here and then they crossed paths and went over. The blue one's fairly linear. So I suspect that's about accurate. 500 RPM should be around 34. And the first thing I noticed is that I was not getting that. In order for this gauge to read 500 RPM, I had to dial in, let's see here, I'm gonna start increasing the frequency. So to read about 500 RPM, I needed about 55 hertz, which is quite a big difference from what I'm expecting. I'm expecting 34 hertz, and instead it's taking 55 hertz. So bottom line is I believe there is something in fact wrong with this particular indicator. As I go through the range, it takes quite a bit more frequency in order to get it to register properly. So I suspect that whoever fixed the gears within the dial itself did not do a successful job. So let's look in one here, being very careful not to mess up the needle. It's a fairly simple device. It uses 4 input pins just for the RPM indicator. The next 4 pins here are for the fuel consumption indicator, and all it is just a simple motor connected to a few gears. So I imagine those gears have failed, and whoever replaced it either did not do a good job with that gear replacement or messed up the spring that returns the gauge. The other thing is that I was expecting to see quite a bit of a difference between these two modules. One being a 4-cylinder, one being a 6-cylinder. I was expecting about a 33% difference in RPM readings between the two, but it was far from that. The results were quite different. Here, let's take this example here, looking at the 8,000 TAC with a 6-cylinder versus the 8000 tach with a 4-cylinder. If we look, 1000 RPM, there's about a small difference, and then they invert at some point, and it's nowhere near a 30% difference between 8500 and 7900 RPM, for example. So I suspect that these modules have more to do with the speed indicator than they have to do with the RPM indicator. But anyway, I'd love your feedback. I know there's probably some gurus out there that have worked on these a bunch of times. If you can help me try to zoom in where this issue lies, I'd appreciate it. And I hope that this video is helpful in some way, at least in getting the clusters sort of, getting a proper setup so you can test the clusters. Next thing I'm going to do is replace the bulbs. There are tons of videos on this out there. There are a variety of bulb indicators. Some are just for backlighting, like these two large orange ones. And then some of the bulbs down below are more for faults and seat belts and parking brake and all of that. So once this clusters out here, I suggest you replace all the bulbs. You never know when the next one's going to blow. So they're fairly inexpensive bulbs. You can buy them from Turner or Circle or just about even Amazon. You can buy most of these bulbs. So when you're in here, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace them all, as well as the battery indicators for the service indicators. So that sits over here. I might as well show you that while we've got one of these open. Again, there's lots of videos out there on how to change these particular lithium batteries. They are responsible for the maintenance intervals, and I suspect their lifespan is 15-20 years max. Here you can see there's 2 batteries. They seem to be, can't tell exactly the model of the voltage, but they are soldered in place, so you will have to desolder them and replace them. Again, also readily available on the internet for you. So that's all I've got for you. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and provide feedback. I'd love to hear what you think about this video and what additional information you've got, whether it's a more accurate reference hertz to RPM indication, or whether or not this is wired properly, or if you agree that there's probably something with a tachometer or where else it may sit. I'd appreciate your feedback. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the channel.